If history feels like a struggle or your child is not retaining much, you may be wondering, is history the problem? Or is it the way I'm teaching it? I'm here to tell you that the problem is not history, it's the way it's taught. Because children will, and teenagers, they will naturally get invested in these stories as long as they are presented to them in the right way. Um, so today we're looking at Story of the World versus Notgrass History to see which one actually fits your child, your type of learner. You know your child, you know how they learn best. And so as we look at these two different curricula, you will have to decide which one would work better because it's a better fit for your children. I'm Adriana Zoder with Homeschool Ways, and I have used both of these curricula in my homeschool over the years. I started homeschooling in 2013 when my oldest was in kindergarten and my second child was in preschool. And if you've ever finished a history lesson and you thought, did my kids actually get any of that? You're not alone. History can either come alive or it can fall flat on its face. So let's dive in. First, Story of the World. What you can expect is 4 volumes that look like this, and this is volume number 4, The Modern Age. So what Susan Weisbauer, the author, has done is she brought the ancient world in volume 1 and then medieval times in volume 2, and so on. We get to Victoria's empire until the end of USSR, the Soviet republics. So this will be in chapter 4, in volume number 4. This is what contains the lessons that you would read to the kids. And it looks like that on the inside where you've got a chapter. There are maps and black and white sketches and illustrations. That's what you read to the children, or they read to themselves. It also comes in audio format. I think her collaborator, Susan's collaborator, is this gentleman that has a specific type of voice. And personally, we did not connect so much with the audio. So, and the kids always liked my voice. So, yes, we bought the first CD set. Back then, we had CDs. And then the other thing, which is almost more important than the actual stories, is this bigger volume that will have the maps that you can, and you have permission to photocopy these. And there will be outlines and different things that you can photocopy for all your children. For instance, you're going to have flags that they can draw or color. They will have maps, and you will have instructions in here what to do with these maps, and lots and lots of exercises in the beginning, review questions to check for comprehension. You complete outlines, like I said, and then there are lists of additional history reading, which are nonfiction. And then there's a fiction list that Susan Weisbauer has put together. And you will see that these literature pieces will correlate with the time period that you're studying. And that is simply, so you're paying some money for this activity book, but she's done the work for you. So it really depends on how much work do you want to do. Do you want to go completely DIY and I remember history and I'm just going to go on the internet every day? and look for something for this week? Or do you want to just invest in this? And I personally chose to invest in this. And we went through this curriculum twice. So we started when my oldest was in first grade. And so we went for 4 years, one volume per year. And then when he was in fifth grade, we started all over again. Guess what? They're completely different children. And so they didn't remember much. They remember some things, but they didn't remember everything. And so what I found is that they love the stories. This Story of the World curriculum is story driven. It's very engaging. It's written to pull the students in, to give them a sense of what people were eating at the time. And, that's big with children, especially young children. And what the smells were like, and what did they wear, and the activities will even have costumes and um, foods that you can create in the kitchen with your children. So on my blog, homeschoolways.com, I actually have Story of the World with every single one of the lessons and the craft that we created, which could be a food, it could be a little pouch like for Robin Hood. I remember we made a snow globe with Napoleon for that lesson. Just everything that we did, I documented on homeschoolways.com under Story of the World. 4 volumes, 30 some lessons in each one, and you will see pictures. My children were very young at the time. Now they are teenagers. We loved Story of the World. The pros of this history curriculum is that history reads like a narrative. It's a story. It's not just facts. The war started in this year and ended in this year, and here's the reason why it started. And it's none of that. It's story after story. It's easy to listen. It's easy to be pulled in. It's easy for you to read. You just open the book and you read to the kids. You don't need to prepare anything. And personally, I like that, and all I had to do is photocopy their maps, and I have that at home. My printer works as, excuse me, as a photocopy machine as well. So it worked for us. You might have to go to a place like a library or Office Depot, Staples, where you can photocopy everything. So the pros are it's easy to listen to and to read. It's great for engagement. My kids were very engaged. I remember one of the lessons when the kids were really little, there was an invasion and we had to build up forts and we had to reenact this battle where there was an invasion and there was somebody in the fort and somebody was coming from the outside. They loved it. They got very engaged with all these things. And it helps the kids remember events. Maybe not dates, but events and the reason why these things happen as they get older and they start saying, yeah, but why did Hitler do that? And why did the Mongols move west after a while? It can feel lighter for older students. It's less in-depth analysis. They get to the level in their minds of asking questions. Why? Why did this happen? Okay, I know what happened. I know how it happened, but why did it happen? And so that in-depth analysis is lacking. And you may need to supplement for sure in high school, which we actually ended up doing. So how did we supplement in high school? Well, after we went through Story of the World twice, starting in first grade and starting in fifth grade, by the time we got to high school, I realized I can't just read stories to them. We have to switch to something more structured, more in depth. And so that brings us to Notgrass History. This is the world history book, number 1. There's another one. They're very thick books. I only brought this one. There's another volume, so volume 2, and this is world history. We did US history, which also had 2 volumes. There's a 3rd volume just this thick with original documents that you don't have to scour the internet for. They're right there. There are pictures, there are paintings, there are sculptures, there are maps. And then you have another book with tests and comprehension questions, and you have another book with all kinds of supplements. So Notgrass for history in high school, and I would say 8th grade. I think already in 8th grade we were doing US history, and it counted as credit for high school. And so Notgrass is what we did, what I would recommend for history in later years, because it's more structured, because it's more in depth, because it often includes worldview and primary sources. It's very important. And it is written from a Christian perspective. I have found that you can skip some of the Bible studies, if not all of them, if you're not interested in that. And that will help with that aspect of history, because a lot of people say it's his story, right? History is God's story, his story. And it helps to have a Christian curriculum. Sometimes I do feel, so let's get into cons. I do feel like it can be a little too Christian, if that's possible. It's like they're struggling to say something spiritual, and you don't have to do that. You have to do that every page, But it is designed to build a deeper understanding of history. It's strong for high school level. It encourages critical thinking. It's more complete than Story of the World as a curriculum for older children. The cons, like I said, it can feel a little heavier. It can feel less entertaining. It requires more effort from the student, and you want your student to feel like they're putting forth more effort when it comes to history, right? They're older, they're in high school, they're at least in 8th grade. So you could do US history in 8th grade, and then world history in 9th or 10th. Of course, you can structure it however your requirements are where you live, but it is less entertaining. And I think the key difference in between Story of the World and Notgrass is that one works for engagement and stories, the other one is depth and structure. Okay, so where are you? Where the question is not, is it better? Which one is better? Is Story of the World better, or is it Notgrass better? That's not the question. And I've said this before in my videos. Sometimes we need to know what questions to ask before we can get the right answer. So the question you should have is not how expensive is it, or which one is cheaper, or which one is better. It's, what does my child need right now? Do I have teens? Then maybe I would go with something more complete, like Notgrass. Do you have younger kids? Then Story of the World. And like I said, even in middle school, I think Story of the World is pretty complete, as long as you do some of the supplements. She gives you those literature suggestions, and you can go into your library and say, hey, I don't want to even read this. I want to read something else. And obviously preview everything that Susan Weisbauer recommends. I'll tell you a story. I went to the library one time with my list of titles, and the librarians were concerned because my kids were really young. I mean, we're talking 7 and 5, or 5 and 3, very young. We were studying the ancient times, I think the Maya culture, the Incas, and there was a very violent book proposed, like with illustrations of human sacrifices. And the librarians were like, are you sure you want to show this to the kids? And so I previewed it just standing there at the desk. And I said, no, I think you're right. Let's not do that. So you want to preview everything. Um, so here's how to make your selection. Choose story of the world if your child is disengaged right now. You may even have a teen that is completely disengaged from you, from the world, from and I don't know where you're at in your homeschool, but a lot of people that pull their kids out of school, they find that their child is very engaged in social media, in what their peers are doing, and they're very disengaged from the world. And what we're trying to do with history and in general in homeschool is to create these citizens of the world that understand the issues, that have values, that have a set of principles that they're going to live by. And so history is very important. It's your vehicle to give them what they need in order to build that scaffolding in their minds, in their character, in their set of values. So if your teen is disengaged, definitely give them story of the world, and you can always supplement with things. If you need to spark interest, if you've got small kids and they're just like completely bored with facts, then definitely you want to spark some interest with stories. If you want history to feel more approachable, I don't care what age your kids are, if you want them to feel that history is more approachable, go for that. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know if I even liked history myself. I grew up with a father who read the history magazine every single month. He had a collection from like 1969 when it started. I'm from Romania, so we're talking about Romania. And so there was this history magazine that my father collected every single month. For years and years and years, we had these collections, these rows and rows of history magazine. I didn't read an article. I didn't care. I really didn't care about history. And I was happy that he liked it and he read it. But I watched my dad read this magazine from cover to cover every month. I didn't care about history. I like languages. I like languages. And so, if you yourself need to spark your own interest in history, maybe start there. You know, start with story of the world and supplement for your level also. You will find these stories will pull you in and they will give you a completely different understanding of history and how things connect. This is going to be good for you too if you're yourself struggling to understand the importance of history and how not to let it feel so dry. Now, if your teen is older, I would make an effort and go with Notgrass. Okay. If you've got an older child, definitely Notgrass. If they're ready for deeper thinking, if they're preparing for high school expectations, then Notgrass is the way to go. And I just want to remind you, if history has not been working, you are not failing. You're here. You are engaging with this video. You are learning. You're trying to find solutions. You're not failing. You're just finding a better way. You're in the process of finding a better way of teaching. And if this video has helped, please subscribe and leave me a comment. Is your child enjoying history right now, whatever curriculum you're using?